And of course, the panel is all set right here this morning. Mike Olio and equally Advice is on board. Before I get to introduce them, let's first of all take a look at this feature that was prepared by my team in regards to that advisory given by the Foreign Affairs Ministry, of course, against us traveling unless it is really a must, and equally in regards to the coronavirus itself. And then we come back to discuss, even as we take a look at some of the stories that have been captured on the newspaper.
Well, thanks very much, Eric. And if you've rightly put, most of us have been hearing about coronavirus in China, but do we really know what exactly coronaviruses are? And that is what we'll be doing right now. And of course, just quickly going into our graphics, as you can see from our screen. Well, starting with coronavirus, what exactly it is? Well, it's a large family of, viruses that cause illnesses ranging, from the common cold to more severe diseases such as Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, and severe acute respiratory syndrome, also known as SARS. And of course, we've had cases of SARS where it's begun in China in 2003, but they were contained very, very well. So that's a good thing. And of course, they were really commended for the same. And of course, the coronavirus as well, or a novel coronavirus, is a new strain that has not been previously identified in humans. And of course, that is why it has brought a lot of issues here and there with the WHO. And of course, coronaviruses basically are zoonotic. Well, that means that they are transmitted between animals and people. Of course, they can also, or detailed investigations found that SARS, that is a type of coronavirus, was also transmitted from civet cats to humans, and MERS from dromedary camels to humans. And of course, several known coronaviruses are circulating in animals that have not yet infected humans again, which is why it is still very new. So let's look at transmission. How is it transmitted? Well, coronaviruses are, like we said, zoonotic. So that means that they can be transmitted between animals and people, or they can also spread from an infected person to another. And of course, this is through air. That is by coughing or sneezing, through personal contact, that is touching or shaking hands, or as well as through touching an object or a surface with virus and then touching your mouth, your nose, or your eyes. And of course, it can also be transmitted through fecal contamination. And of course, this is very, very rare. So it's not as common as compared to these other modes of transmission. Now, when we talk about coronavirus, how do you know that you have been infected? Well, the most common signs of coronavirus or the infection include respiratory symptoms like fever. We're talking about coughing, we're talking about shortness of breath and breathing difficulties as well. But that doesn't stop there. Well, in severe cases, it can cause or present itself as pneumonia. It can present itself as severe acute respiratory syndrome. We have cases of kidney failure, and of course the most severe cases can also lead to death. So that tells you that it's a very serious type of infection or coronavirus. And like we said, this is still fairly new, so a lot of investigations are going into it. And of course, later on we'll be looking about the treatment options, which again, it's still under investigations. Now that we know the signs and symptoms, how it presents itself in the milder form and in the severe cases, so what can we do to reduce our risk of infection, that is by coronavirus? Well, what you need to do is clean your hands with soap and water or alcohol-based hand rub. And of course, you can also cover your mouth and your nose as well when you're coughing or sneezing. And of course, we know you can actually do that by either with a tissue, or you can actually, folded elbow, where, of course, that will help you in terms of prevention of the infection. And as well, you can also thoroughly cook meat and eggs, because remember earlier on we said this actually started, and that is through animals, and then it was also transmitted to human beings. And of course, we're talking about cases of meat and eggs as well. So make sure that you cook them very, very well, especially during this period where the risks are very, very high. Anybody can, get in contact, or anybody can get infected with the same. And also avoid close contact with anyone showing symptoms, and as well as avoid unprotected contact with live, wild, or farm animals as possible. And this might be very difficult, especially for people or farmers at home. But then again, just try. You can either use a mask, or as well ensure that you wear protective, either gloves or all those things. Now, we're not only talking about protecting ourselves, but we also need to protect people around us. And that is to avoid cases of contamination. And what we can do Number one is wash your hands, and that is after coughing or sneezing. And when we're talking about washing your hands, make sure that you wash your hands under running water with soap, or if there's no water around you, then you can use alcohol-based sanitizer. And then when you're caring for the sick person, also make sure that you are washing your hands, or you wash your hands before, during, and after you prepare food. And of course, before eating, after you use the toilet, and of course, when your hands are visibly dirty. Or alternatively, after handling animals or animal waste as well. And of course, even for the children, make sure that they wash their hands. Or when you're touching or carrying your baby, make sure that you also wash your hands to just avoid the risk of contamination. Because remember, the children, of course, their immune system is very, very low, so they can get infected very, very easily as compared to adults. Now, there's some people who might argue and say, well, but I work in wet markets. For instance, I sell fish, I sell, chicken, or I sell meat. What can I do to ensure that I also prevent myself from getting, the infection? Well, what you need to do is wear protective gowns. You can also wear gloves. Make sure that you also put on facial protection. And when you're done with work, that is before you go home, make sure that you remove protecting clothing, that is after work. Wash them daily and leave them at the work site. You do not want to carry anything that is contaminated at home. And also avoid exposing family members to soiled work clothing and shoes. So again, this is just to reduce the risk of contamination from one person to the other, because like we said, this transmits very, very easily from one person to the other through various means that we've talked about. So ensure that wherever you are, you protect yourself and your loved ones from contaminating coronavirus. And this is before we get the treatment option, because like we said, this is a fairly new strain of coronaviruses. So before we get the different treatment options, make sure that you protect yourself and ensure that you do not get infected with this virus. Back to you, Eric.
Right. Thank you so much, Winnie, for that comprehensive, of course, take through in regards to coronavirus. And now you know what you're supposed to know in regards to the same. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know how to put this. So the gentlemen that I had on set were busy, sort of having their very own side. And I'm thinking, you people sort of think that you're immune to this. Did you even hear what Winnie said? Anything to do with that? Or maybe you are well-braced in terms of information in regards to this?
Just the work of God.
It's just the work of God. If it happens, it happens. But it's pretty much unfortunate.
It's unfortunate.
But Linda, it can come.
Yes, it can.
Nowadays diseases travel very fast. And because there are very high human migration.
Yeah.
So many people travel across the world every single minute. So I don't think Africa is that safe yet, because many people are still flying to China. Many people are flying to other parts of the world. Kenya has 2 flights per week to Guangzhou. Yeah. And those flights are never empty. That means it's very easy for those who are flying back to bring it here.
Right.
So it's important that precautions are taken so that we don't end up with a crisis that we cannot handle. Remember, we are not so technologically stable to deal with it the way the Chinese are doing. So we pray it will not reach here. And we pray that if it reaches here, we shall get quick response to deal with the situation. But I also observed that it is not just in China. It has in other parts of Asia as well. It is in Japan, it is in South Korea, it's in North Korea, even in Canada, even in the US. So it's really a world problem. So it's not just people who are flying from China who can bring it here. Even probably those who are flying in from Canada or even the US may just bring it because it's already reached those shores.
Right.
So it's something quite worth thinking about.
And of course, stay woke. I think Winnie has extensively given you, the key information that you need to know in regards to the same. Sort of observe yourself, observe others in terms of the symptoms, and if necessary, proceed and report or maybe seek attention as quick as possible. But then equally, with the travel advisories that have been given on board across different sort of nations, I think it's good to adhere to that until the whole situation is contained. Now, let's proceed over to the, of course, newspapers of the day in regards to matters politics, and advised that I should focus much on matters politics when it comes to questioning him and all that. And yes, I think I'll heed to the advice. We have like about 10 minutes of going through what is on the newspapers this morning. So we're doing it a little bit different before we delve deep into the question of discussion, because a majority of the stories that have been captured right here, the very stories that we'll be discussing this morning, of course, the Standard newspaper and the Daily Nation newspaper. The first sort of story, or the biggest story in the Daily Nation newspaper, is that revolt as Ruto group resolves to go into it alone, vowing that this is the beginning of the end between the two leaders. More than 100 MPs who support the deputy president plot to bring Uhuru under pressure over BBI campaign. This is contrary to what we have witnessed, the two leaders sort of meeting for the longest of time. I mean, in this year at least, in what has been captured also on the front page of the Star newspaper. And you know, theirs has been a discussion in regards to how they can make BBI a successful sort of bid. And Deputy President William Ruto equally has accepted that, yes, they are all together running towards ensuring that the BBI is a success. So when you see these contradictory sort of occurrences where, yes, leaders allied to the Deputy President William Ruto sort of form their very own parallel sort of rallies, and on this other end, the two leaders seem to be working together, what does it speak about the politics of the nation as it stands today? Advice?
Thank you. I think, first of all, what comes out very openly is the fact that the person who is interested in politics today is actually the politicians aligned to the deputy president who call themselves Tanga, because they are reacting after the Coast BBI rally. I think in their expectation, they wanted a lot of drama during that rally. They wanted to be arrested. They wanted tear gas. They wanted something that can whip emotions and then attract sympathy. So then they can then be justified to do whatever they want to do. Yeah. Now, because the BBI planners did not get into their plans, I think they got a bit distorted, and now they are now trying to react from that. And even in their reaction, as you can see, anyone would just judge that it's not a very proper laid out strategy, because in politics, once you find yourself as a politician on the side of reacting more than acting, then you're doing the wrong thing, definitely.
All right. It sounded like it was a political score for, you know, Team Tanga over the weekend, you know, at the Coast. It's as though we've already delved into the discussion, though they are captured right here on the front page. And even as ODM pushes for new power structure, of course, that is captured on page 8 of
I wanted to say something on the Tanga thing.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And also, I'm getting it into it. Now, of course, sounded like it was a political score for them. So then Advice today says that it's probably what they did not expect, and hence they had to calm down at that particular time and go down, revert, and figure out what other direction they would take in regards to the same.
Thank you, Linda. I had forgotten to appreciate that today you've patterned me with Advice here.
You? Oh, okay.
I've watched him before. We've never been together on set.
Okay.
But let me say this. The Tanga Brigade has at long last realized that you cannot attend somebody else's wedding and expect to outshine the bride or the bridegroom.
Definitely.
It never happens that way. If you want to be the star, you organize your own wedding. You will be the star. Everybody will come to watch you, and whatever you do will always be correct. So it has finally dawned on them, and that's quite something. Secondly, the Tanga Brigade has also realized that the BBI train has already left the station. And it's going. So sulking or whining by the roadside doesn't help. You better find a way of dealing with the situation as it is moving. That's important. The third thing out of this Naivasha thing is that it is clear that the Jubilee house is in a free fall. And pretty much anybody can assemble a group of MPs and declare it a parliamentary group and pass resolutions and purport to bind everybody.
Disputed by the party.
Disputed by the party.
Again.
But you just see the courage and the brazenness with which the Naivasha meeting took place, and you can tell that they're actually calling the bluff of number one. Because they are there in a big group without fear of censure or consequences.
But again, you look at it, and this is what comes out. To me, anything that has been led by Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen and Moses Kuria has always ended up a joke extended too far.
All right, hold it right there. Hold your thoughts right there, advice, so that we don't delve deep into the discussion, because then it's what forms the basis of our discussion this morning on the very first instance. Let's first of all just wind up on these particular issues on the newspaper, because there's not so much, of course, to cover, apart from the fact that, you know, all the stories sort of revolve around that. On the question of corruption still, DP Ruto accused of diverting villagers' water to his farm. I mean, is it now escalating to a level where we can confidently say it's witch hunt? Or there could be some genuine sort of, you know, allegations in regards to how much, you know, Deputy President William Ruto has had allegations of, you know, corruption leveled against him?
You know, Linda, we live in an age of verification. And nowadays, everything you say should be evidence-based or evidence-backed. I doubt if that story is baseless. Nobody can just wake up and create a story like that unless there is evidence, unless it is verified. So since we live in an era of verification, I highly suspect that that story is accurate, which is really unfortunate, because if the interests of the people in the neighborhood are endangered because of the interest of one person, that's very bad, particularly for a leader, and particularly for a leader who wants to lead the country into the future.
All right. An interesting story here, captured on page 6 of the Daily Nation. Advice: relief for borrowers as CBK cuts lending rates. That's a bit of course, matters economy, it's a bit of matters business. And, of course, the central bank has lowered the base lending rate, sparing borrowers costly loans. And the CBK lowered the lending rate to 8.25% from 8.50% to boost the country's economy, which is said to be operating below its potential. Quite a huge margin that would create an impact?
Yes, but...
it's a small margin, but do you suppose it would create an impact?
It would, but basically to the high-level business people who are looking at borrowing money in large chunks of money. But actually now to the small business people, it's very negligible. And again, in my view, such stories about how to go about lending, I think CBK should also look at the matters of the young people, because the young people have great ideas and they also want to borrow this money, but the young people don't have collateral to take this money. It's also a question that they should start addressing in good time, because most of these young people want to start something, they want to start a business, but they don't have the title deed or the logbook to take there. So in as much as they're doing this, and we appreciate what they have done, but why can they also go a notch higher and look into that factor so that they see the practical way in which they can be able to also help the young people who are rising stars, and they also want to thrive in this business, especially people in the creative sector, people in the film industry, people in the theater industry. There is basically the biggest asset they have that they can bring you is a script. So, and this is happening in other countries like South Africa, and people are being given money on the basis of production, on scripts and such things. So I think that's also a direction that CBK should also take, and not just focus on the lending of the big fish in the market.
All right, because of course for the longest of time they've been considered to prefer lending money to the government, because then of course the risk is a little bit lower. And SMEs out here have been complaining that it's not been very easy for them to conduct business right here in the country. That aside, another story that was captured yesterday that was pretty much, should have been on Sunday, in regards to how much of course our hospitals are fleecing money from patients, and of course an extension of it right here, captured on page 10 of the Daily Nation. And of course now, KMPDU sort of suggests that working public hospitals are a remedy to this. How Nairobi Women's Hospital milks patients dry in crazy revenue game. And it's not just Nairobi Women's, of course, damning reports in regards to how much, of course, you attend hospital. And sometimes it's also in regards to the fact that, they will even diagnose you with something that is not there, just so they would keep getting money out of it. And it's pretty much unfortunate, because it is happening. You go to hospital, I mean, a majority of Kenyans sort of fear going to hospital, because then they know very well the expenses they'll incur, they might not be able to sustain. And you all know that it's not been an easy route or a smooth route in regards to NHIF processes.
Linda, this story, I have interacted with it personally. When you pay a visit to a hospital in Kenya today, among the first questions you are asked is, are you insured?
Yeah.
Once they realize that you are insured,
They enjoy.
rest assured you are going to be admitted.
Yes.
They will come up with a reason to make sure that you are admitted, so that at least you spend a night, whether it is for observation or whatever. But that is the trend, because they know that once you are insured, they are clear that they will not have problems with the payment,
Right.
which is very, I think that's unethical, because if you go for a simple ailment, you should be treated and be discharged as an outpatient. That's the way it ought to be. But hospitals have been doing this for a very long time. I wonder why it took so long to come out in the media, particularly in the mainstream media, because this is something that happens every day.
Yeah.
Hospitals have been fleecing people in a big way. And there are many other issues that have been going on in our hospitals that have not come to light yet. They will devise many ways to keep you in hospital for long.
Yeah.
Longer than you even expect. And even the prescriptions that they give you, some of them will be unnecessarily expensive. When there are alternatives they can prescribe, they will not. Okay? And by the time you are through, when you look at your bill, what you are supposed to pay for will be out of this world.
The argument is that
business.
we go seek private, of course, services, because then it's not a good environment when you go to the public ones. Yet this is being proposed as a remedy to that. Do you suppose that it can offer a proper remedy in regards to the same? Because we have run away from public hospitals because then we felt like they do not meet up the standards, and we ran to private hospitals.
The reason why people run away from public hospitals is one, queues are shorter in private hospitals, and queues are very long in public hospitals. So people who don't want to wait for long prefer private hospitals. Secondly, doctors who are employed by government, it's easier to find them in private hospitals. After reporting in public hospitals, they spend most of their time in private hospitals. Yeah. So it's easier to get their attention in private hospitals than in public hospitals. And that needs to be remedied. From a policy perspective, I think it is important that we pass proper policies that will make sure that doctors who are employed by government stay in government hospitals. Because that's why we pay them. That's why taxpayers pay them. So it doesn't make sense that a doctor reports in a public hospital and then walks out immediately, and nobody knows where he is, and you cannot question him. That's terrible.
That is terrible. All right, of course, so much so captured in the newspapers. We'll not delve deep into them. Of course, scientists call for drone technology to fight locusts ranging the north. It's pretty much unfortunate how much the locusts are invading, different parts or maybe of the country. And we certainly hope that the government is able to address that. Also, of course, on the Standard newspaper, more or less the same stories. We still continue to mourn the death of Kobe and, of course, the daughter, or Kobe and the daughter, depending on where you come from. And equally, so much so in regards to matters politics right here in the country. And not forgetting what played out on the Grammy. And the Grammys are, of course, celebrating Angelique Kidjo on top of course, the world. Benin singer, songwriter Angelique Kidjo won the Grammy Award for Best World Music Album for Celia during the 62nd Annual Grammy Awards in Los Angeles Sunday. That story has been captured on page 3, and also much in regards to what played out at that particular, of course, celebratory session. And let's now cross over for a breather. And I think, gentlemen, I ambushed you in regards to the question of the newspaper, but all the same issues that affect us. But then we come and discuss much more in regards to the question of politics, the Tanga meeting in Naivasha. We take a look at what, of course, is playing out within the corridors of justice, the release of Babu Owino, or of course expected release upon his payment of the first sort of installment or first bit of the bail that was awarded to him. That is 10 million cash bail. And equally, the special sitting that is set for today and tomorrow in regards to the impeachment process of Kiambu Governor Ferdinand Waititu. Hold it right there. We'd love to hear from you. Hashtag UDKE, the SMS short code 40920. Send in your comments, or you can as well call us. The numbers will be scrolling down on your screen. And let's get to hear what you have to say in regards to this. All this on the state of affairs right here. Keep it, Ebru TV. All right, and we are back to the discussion. We start off with the Naivasha meeting, of course, from Tanga, or maybe leaders who are allied to the Deputy President William Ruto, much as maybe they came out strongly to say that they are in support of the BBI and still not changing tone. Looks like, you know, the world sort of feels like maybe they're not genuine in their move or in their bid towards ensuring that the BBI is a success. And if they are at all, they are not as sensitive in regards to the question of peace. But then who is supposed to be sensitive in regards to the same? A majority would have expected for them to join the bandwagon, of course, that is being spearheaded by Right Honorable Raila Odinga in regards to ensuring that the BBI reaches the people, for the people to have a conversation, you know, public conversation in regards to the same surrounding and revolving the details of it, so that we see whether we can top up or reduce some of the things that are within, of course, the BBI report. But then them coming out to say that they're going to set up parallel rallies in regards to reaching out to the people is something that has sparked a lot of uproar, and of course a set to sort of bring differences much more politically, and also speaking out volumes in the kinds of course, differences we witness within the Jubilee Party. Because if they are a section that are allied to Deputy President William Ruto, and then there's a section that is sort of backing President Uhuru Kenyatta's bid, and they all speak in different tongues or in different tones or are in different podiums, then it clearly shows that there's a huge difference within the Jubilee Party, something that they have been disputing for the longest of time. Let's first of all listen in to what played out in regards to the same, then we come back to discuss much more on that.
We've ended the discussion of us versus them. So in the Nakuru rally, we are expecting His Excellency the President, if his schedule permits, His Excellency the Deputy President, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, Wetangula, and all other leaders of party, including Dida and Okuru Okot. We want all Kenyans to meet in Nakuru and demonstrate that this us versus them is over. So there are no parallel rallies. Number two, we are enhancing the number of the rallies. Since this is a people-driven process, we don't believe that anybody should be paid any allowances to attend a meeting. Ours is just to logistical support, public address, a podium, and we expect the governor of Nakuru to be there to also join us. The Senator of Nakuru is already here. The MPs of Nakuru are here.
We fully support the BBI 1 in all its elements as presented at Bomas.
We have resolved as follows. We will mobilize, participate, and encourage all Kenyans to attend rallies already announced. We will ensure the mainstreaming of other stakeholders, including business people, farmers, professionals, youth, religious groups, and civil society in this process, and not just politicians or elites.
We have noted with great concern the manner in which the BBI popularization rallies have been conducted so far. The discussions have mainly been on personalities and positions of the political class.
It is our proposal that a minimum of 3.5% of the national revenue be allocated to the judiciary.
All right, and once again, gentlemen, Advice Mudala, political and communication strategist, still in regards to the question of Tanga Tanga. While we were going through the newspapers, you wanted to delve a little bit deep, and then I had to cut you short. Yeah. I mean, just from the outlook, as it stands right now, of course, that address by Tanga Tanga leaders, what do you make of this whole move?
You know, Linda, Kipchumba Murkomen always makes me very happy. When Murkomen is alone, he's very confident.
Yes.
Murkomen, most of the leaders in the Tanga Tanga Union, when they are alone, they're very confident. You listen to Moses Kuria when he's speaking alone at a press conference, and you feel like this is a very, very courageous man.
Right.
But when they get in the presence of Raila Odinga, where the confidence disappears to is one thing I have not understood.
Probably it's just a camouflage where you know very well that at this particular podium you can't speak daddy because Baba comes along with proper support.
It is not a camouflage in my view. It is just a sign of weakness. And these guys are simply, they have simply, and actually I was saying that anything that you look even before that is led by Kipchumba Murkomen and Moses Kuria is always, you look at it and it's more always a joke extended too far. Look at the photos that were circulating on social media in regard to the meeting that they had. And everyone was looking at them and wondering whether they were actually having a meeting or they went for a photo shoot. So there is nothing much that comes out of this meeting. It's basically a reactionary approach that they are doing. They are basically reacting because what they expected to happen in Mombasa did not happen. They wanted to be tear-gassed, they wanted to be humiliated, so they attract the attention of Kenyans and get a signal of sympathy. That is what these guys expected.
They were looking for.
Now that they did not get the sympathy, they are now trying to get an exit plan. And the problem with Tangatanga, and I've always said that the biggest problem Tangatanga always has, is that they have too much energy with very little strategy. Now you can see a lot of energy that they are exposing there on the media, addressing the press very confidently. But I can even assure you that even in their own plan of these rallies, it is very unlikely that they will do more than 2. It is very unlikely. They're just making this reactionary approach, and they're starting with Nakuru because they know they have Susan Kihika there. And also remember that Tangatanga has realized that the BBI bus is not stopping. And before they realize it, it will be in their bedrock, in their regions, especially the Rift Valley. And so these guys are looking at it and wondering, when the BBI comes to Rift Valley and the meeting will happen, what will be the judgment of Kenyans? That is the time that they will be known not to be having a lot of ground support. And therefore it's important that they also start doing something. And that is basically what they are doing right now. And it is, when you look at it conclusively, it is purely a poor strategy. These are the same leaders who asked why we are popularizing a document everybody agrees with. These are the same people. Now they are joining the bandwagon to again popularize the same document. These are the people who said the rallies were not
were expensive. Then
were
expensive. More rallies.
And they are the same guys now doing the same rallies. So in my view, I think, in fact, Tangatanga is branding William Ruto as a leader who is not progressive with his ideas, who does not stand by his ideology, because he could have stood for something. You know, a leader is known to stand for something. You must stand for something. Now, in record 1 week, you change your mind 3 times. Really, as a leader, it doesn't make sense.
When you note very well advice that, you know, nobody can stop reggae, let me use those words, and the fact that, yes, the train is on and nobody can stop it at this juncture, then probably they have come to the realization of that. And because they have constantly said that they equally support the BBI, they've seen the essence of going on ground and sensitizing the common mwananchi. What we genuinely have lacked to see on, of course, the rallies that have been conducted so far, the 3 rallies, of course, in Kisii, and, you know, crossing over to this particular point where we are, Kakamega, of course, and Mombasa. I mean, Mike, when you come in, don't you think there would be genuine to say that, indeed, we've seen lots of politics and we've seen lots of showdowns and drama on these other rallies, and we sort of feel like they are probably not sensitizing the common mwananchi to a point whereby they can start that conversation. And now they see the essence of proceeding to do that, so that at least in unison, the common mwananchi will not feel like they're left out.
Thank you, Linda. Now, there is something curious that happened on Saturday when Raila and his team were in Mombasa. The same day, DP Ruto was in Cherangani. I saw him there with Sudi and Kositany. They went to do a rambe for some churches there. And he said something, that the same people who spoke in Kisii are the same fellows who spoke in Kakamega, and are the same people who are speaking in Mombasa. And he asked a question, when will the Mwananchi speak?
Yes.
I am now very curious to see hii rally ya kina Murkomen, how it is structured so that the Mwananchi will speak in their rally. Because from what I can see, it is going to more or less follow the same pattern as the other one that they were criticizing. They have not said anything that is different from the way that other group is organizing theirs.
Actually, they are worse.
We cannot wish them away at this early stage.
In my view, Linda,
we are not wishing them away. We are only saying we are curious.
What if they just bring that conversation that will change the whole thing?
Maybe.
The whole narrative.
We will support them.
Yeah.
And by the way, wishing them away is not appropriate at this point, because if you look at the audience that assembled in Naivasha, it is 173 members strong. That's not a small number in politics. So they are brave enough to go to Naivasha when they know the consequences can be deadly. if they are really determined to prove a point, they can. If they have proper strategy, they can make whatever they are talking about a reality.
Yeah.
It's important to give them the benefit of the doubt now and watch and see how this thing will unfold. But my brother advice here is very interesting. He has already dismissed them offhand.
On the onset.
which I find very, very good.
Though his dismissal could be justified because just the other day they had said that they're going to...
Yeah, he has got very substantive grounds.
A leader needs to give direction. Right. And a leader needs to be known to stand for something. You cannot change your mind every other time.
But you can differ democratically, which is equally a democratic right.
Because these people told us that now they have chosen to support the BBI process. Unlike before, when they were criticizing even the process, these are the same leaders who told us that the formation of the BBI from the beginning is unconstitutional. They told us that that is unconstitutional. They told us that they questioned where the monies for the BBI is even coming from. Then later on, they changed their mind and then supported the BBI and complained that they were not involved in the planning of the launch of the BBI. Leaders who are not supporting the BBI complained that they were not involved in the launching of the BBI. Look at that twist. Now, later on they criticized even the popularization campaigns. Then later on they changed their mind and say, no, now we will join.
Okay, who then should stay woke in this particular case, advice? Because then they substantiated the reason why they were claiming the, of course, coming in of the BBI on the onset was not legally correct.
Yes.
And, you know, getting to that point, of course, they equally said, you know, all these rallies that we are conducting are pretty much expensive for the common mwananchi.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden, people are asking why the change of tone? Why, of course, all of a sudden are you here to support the BBI? Are they playing games on the common mwananchi?
Actually, the person who is doing politics here is the Tangatanga group.
Right.
And the Tangatanga group has been keen to do politics from the onset. And they thought that the joining of the rallies of the BBI rallies will politicize those rallies. Now, unfortunately, they discovered that they are being accepted into the BBI conversation, which was not their expectation. And then they realized that when you choose to play by the tone of Raila Odinga and join his team, you basically become a subject to Raila Odinga. They saw that in Mombasa. They discovered that they cannot outshine Raila Odinga. Like my colleague said about the wedding, you can't. It's very difficult for you to be able to rise above. Why are we making this a Raila
Odinga factor? Why are we making the BBI a Raila Odinga factor? And we saw what played out in Mombasa. And it got a lot of, you know, sort of pundits questioning why. It all sounded as though it was about praising Baba. It was about, you know, what Raila Odinga has done. And we all agree that we celebrate him in regards to the changes that he has made in the country, notable changes, including the coming in of multi-partyism. But then at this particular juncture, we are going to a rally that we're supposed to project the issues of the common mwananchi, but the whole affair turns out to be, oh, let's celebrate Baba. Equally, what you are trying to say right now, that, you know, they realize that they cannot fight Baba. Should it be a battle, of course, against Baba and against Ruto and not a question?
Definitely, Linda, it shouldn't be about Raila Odinga, it shouldn't be about Uhuru Kenyatta, it shouldn't be about William Ruto. But the reality on the ground is that it is about these personalities. And we have to appreciate the fact that even the initiation of the handshake itself came from Raila and Uhuru Kenyatta. We have to appreciate that fact. And now the Tangatanga wing of Jubilee came into this because to them, this has always been a Raila Odinga factor. When you look at all what they have always said, you look at Right Honorable William Ruto when he was speaking to students, and he was telling them that you cannot tell us when to come into the BBI or not. You see, they have always made it look like a Raila Odinga factor. And the reason they have always done that is to shape a certain narrative and perception so that they can be able to pursue a political agenda. And that's why they are discovering that now, because when you go into BBI, most likely you play second fiddle to Raila Odinga and endorse his views, then let us do a counter. I want to ask you.
Is it a counter?
Just before, I want to say, the BBI meeting must have the BBI team. There must be a memoranda, like you saw in, and I want to say in Kisii, Kakamega and Mombasa, we saw Mwananchi speak because there was always a meeting that preceded the rally, right? And in the meeting, like in Mombasa, we had 800 people drawn from different different places across the region.
The region, yes.
In Kakamega, the meeting was done in Zoya Guest House. So there was always a meeting that deliberated on the issues, put up their issues into a document, then presented this to the BBI task force. Now, in these meetings that are being spearheaded by the Tanga team, we need to ask ourselves now, who will be documenting these issues?
All right,
who
we have
will
the
be
steering
receiving
committee that is set to do that. And the steering committee, of course, is ready. They've not yet to roll out the countrywide program to get public say. And of course, in this, they're expected to solicit, consider written memorandum and schedule tight moments where, of course, the common mwananchi will be involved actively. And remember the timelines to this, Mike. 30th June 2020 is the deadline for BBI steering committee to submit a comprehensive advice to President Uhuru Kenyatta. And we're also looking at a situation where it's going to present a referendum to us. And all these timelines and all these side shoots, do you suppose then really we need these kinds of divisions that we are witnessing today?
One thing, Linda, if you read the Gazette notice that extended the life of this committee, one, it changed the name. So it is no longer the BBI Advisory Task Force. Now it is the BBI Steering Committee, which means the other body is dead. This is a new one. You cannot even go to court to stop them. The way Okia Omutata wanted to do. Now it will be a stranger to that process. Two, that same Gazette notice talked about timelines. The end of June that you are talking about is just the farthest. It says that actually they can bring the process to a close even earlier.
Right.
Which means they can even bring it to a close at the end of February. And say we've heard from everybody else, and this is what we have decided, and they are the gazetted group that can present their report. Nobody else can present a report now to the president because the appointing authority is the president. So that is taken care of. Now, there is something about, you asked about the rally in Mombasa that turned out to be a Raila thing. I like giving, not the devil his due, but I like giving credit where it's due. Raila has a machinery that works for him. Love him or hate him, he has a machinery that works for him. And I watched the week before Mombasa, I watched Senator Malala, who is his very big sidekick.
I think lieutenant is a better word.
He declared on TV. I was watching, he was there, Cherargei was there, and some other two guys, I think, they were there. And Malala said that the rally they were going to attend in Mombasa was their rally. And if the DP attended, he would speak before Raila. That is how Raila's machinery works. It is made pretty clear to you very much in advance where you fall and how you are supposed to behave. My friend Moses Kuria was accosted in Mombasa when he refused to stand up when Raila arrived at the venue, and he complained. I saw that in social media.
He did.
That is a system that works for that guy. So his function is his function. And as I said, you cannot attend somebody else's wedding and expect to outshine the bridegroom or the bride. You will be beaten.
You will be beaten.
Because if you are a man and you want to outshine the bridegroom, it means you have other issues with the bride. And you will not be taken kindly. Now, I want to talk about the three guys. Uhuru Kenyatta, Raila Odinga, and William Ruto. The three of them, you will never find the same response about their role in this country today. It will always depend on who you ask. It will, even if you ask Linda now, what you think about them is totally different from what advice will think and what I think about them. So they will always come to the center stage of this process, whether we like it or not, whether they attend the rallies or not. Their names will always be there.
And in my view, there is no problem with their names being there because, you know, in every nation, nations are built by individuals. No matter the ideals in a nation, we must have a driving force. There must be people that lead processes. That's why we remember the likes of Nelson Mandela in South Africa. We remember Mwalimu Julius Nyerere in Tanzania. These are individuals who led processes. So we cannot be able to run into the narrative of we must be able to do away with these names. These names will always be there because we like it or not. These are the change agents that we have. And
our biggest worry is that we have three names that are as strong and, you know, of course, sort of brings a lot of division. And maybe just a reminder.
And they are not going anywhere unless God takes away any of them.
Right.
They are there, and they are going to determine the political dispensation 2022, whether we like it or not, whether they are in office or not, whether they win or not. They will definitely influence the outcome.
All right. Of course, Jubilee Party also coming to dispute this move, though they say that the Tanga side should just, they're allowed to proceed and, you know, exercise their democratic right in regards to the same. But they say that it's not in agreement to what, of course, or maybe it did not have the blessing of the entire party management and all that. I mean, what does it speak of that? And what then is the role of President Uhuru Kenyatta and Deputy President William Ruto in ensuring that they bring sanity within themselves? Because for BBI to sail through, one of the key things that has been sold with it or along the BBI is the question of the handshake that speaks about the unity of the people of Kenya and the peaceful aspect of the people of Kenya.
Linda, I have not read the Jubilee Constitution, but I belong to very many organizations. Some of them are even chair. Every organization, when you read the Constitution, it's usually very clear that the chair shall convene meetings. But there is always a clause below that. In the absence of the chair, somebody else can convene the meeting.
Yeah.
In the absence of that other somebody else, members can demand for a meeting and it can be convened.
Right.
In all constitutions that I've seen. So the question is, the meeting that Tuju is dismissing, did it reach a certain threshold?
Okay.
Did it get the members that can actually demand for a meeting and get it?
All right.
If they met that threshold, then they are in order.
All right. Are they?
I don't agree.
Let's first listen into what Tuju had to say, and then I come to you direct.
Okay.
And of course, this is the memo, of course, that Tuju sent, you know, to newsrooms and Jubilee Parliamentary Group meeting. It has come to our notice that the Jubilee Party headquarters, that is in the last 2 days, some members of the Jubilee Party, including some sitting members of Parliament, held a retreat in Naivasha that was initiated by themselves. That party has no problem. The party has no problems with such initiatives. Needless to say that freedom of association enshrined in our constitution. However, the avoidance of doubt, or for the avoidance of doubt, this is to clarify that such a meeting cannot and will never qualify to be referred to as a parliamentary group meeting of the party. A parliamentary group meeting of the party is only valid when it is convened under Article 9, Part 7 of the party constitution and is chaired by the party leader or such other person the party leader may delegate such role of chairing. Any resolutions of any meeting not convened in accordance with the provisions of the party constitution are therefore not official party resolutions for avoidance of doubt. Of course, the Naivasha retreat was not a parliamentary group meeting. Yours sincerely, Honorable Raphael Tuju, the Secretary General, Jubilee Party.
Linda, that just sums it all, because what I wanted to say is a party, and most of the parties in Kenya that have working structures and a constitution, a parliamentary group meeting is only convened by the party leader or the person delegated to do so by the party leader. Now, when you look at this meeting that was held, we have to ask ourselves who convened the meeting. Yeah, because when you look at it now, is it Honorable Moses Kuria? Is Kuria even a member of the NEC of Jubilee? Is it Kipchumba Murkomen? So this is not a PG meeting. I would really agree with Honorable Raphael Tuju. This is and remember, even in the meeting they said that they are Jubilee party MPs and other members who agree with them in their ideology. So that definitely then cannot be a party PG. So this is just this is a creation of the Tanga wave. I think they're just running away from using the name Tanga. It's high time they accept it. It's high time they accept the name, legitimize it, and just start running around with it.
And connect it to the Deputy President William Ruto directly. Do you suppose it's fair to do so?
Exactly.
When his face is not...
If, you know, they always say when it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck and does everything like a duck, then definitely that is a duck. We cannot really separate these two. The Deputy President has always been very smart enough in his politics to try and look like these are just individuals and they have a right to express themselves. But then why should their expression of themselves always be in your favor? That is what we would always ask ourselves. So this is purely their own creation. But, you know, in politics, you can do anything for as long as it works for you. But my biggest problem, as I told you, there is always a lot of energy within the Tanga Brigade, but very little strategy.
All right,
and that's why I give them 1 week, give them 2 weeks.
We'll not even have the first meeting.
They will now denounce the rallies and start something else. Because they are basically reacting to every other issue. But Linda, they are being a reactionary group. Leaders don't react. They act to issues.
All right.
That's why they get it wrong.
I have a question, which has just come up after my brother advisor has spoken. So the parliamentary group is convened by the president.
Yes, who's the party leader.
Who is the party leader. And I find it a bit of some irony that the president himself is not a member of parliament.
Yeah.
So how does
it then proceed to
convene members of parliament?
But is the key figure within this particular?
This is not a party matter. Party structures are NEC, governing council, those other things. Well,
so in a way contradicting. Equally, sort of exposing some loopholes within
that structure of theirs. I'm not condemning or appreciating anything, but I've just noticed that it is funnily drafted that a guy who is not a member of parliament convenes parliamentarians to discuss matters that he...
It is purely a party matter. You know, from the point in which my friend is basing his argument, is organizational structure of mostly organizations and institutions, not political parties. Go to most political parties and PGs are convened by the party leader.
Probably that's the reason why there was that call.
Because the party leader can even fail to be elected. Like, for example, the party leader of ANC, he's not an elected leader on any ticket. But then you cannot say then he will be the party leader, but then some of his juniors will be convening meetings on his behalf. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense. It is just, that is the party structure, and political parties just work like that. And I think there is nothing wrong with that. It is like when you go to Ibri TV. At Ibro TV, I'm sure the CEO convenes meetings with the reporters. It doesn't need to be a reporter.
It doesn't need to be a reporter and a host. And our all-time favorite is here. Of course, the panelists at home, John Adamba. Thank you so much for calling in. Vushie. Vushie, Baba.
Wacha tuseme namna hivi.
Ndio.
Angalia Murkomen. Murkomen ni kiongozi aliyechaguliwa na wananchi. Tuangalie kwa mfano na majority ya Jubilee Tanga. Ni ukiangalia wale watu wengi sana pale ni watu ambao wamechaguliwa na wananchi. Lakini ukija kuangalia katika maneno yao vile wanasema, wanamuelekezea baba lawama za kisiasa. Nataka kusema namna hivi Linda, ninajua ninasikitika kwa sababu baba hakuchaguliwa. Baba hana posti yoyote katika serikali. Baba ni kiongozi ambaye ninaweza kusema sijui ni kinara wa ODM, sijui ni kinara wa upinzani. Mambo kama namna na sisi wenyewe wananchi tunamuita baba. So, shida ni moja. Nisikilizeni vizuri sana. Shida ni moja. Hao wameshindwa kuendeleza ile agenda ya BBI. Kwa maana agenda ya BBI ni mpango mzima wa serikali. Na wao vile wamechaguliwa na wajue wao ndio serikali. Sasa wameshindwa pale wameshindwa kabisa kuelekeza ule mpango wa serikali kwa wananchi. Sasa wanaanza kumlenga Raila. Na Raila kujue baba hajachaguliwa. Hiyo ni pointi yangu moja kubwa sana na ni nzito. Na ningependa kuwaomba namna hivi hao Jubilee Tanga. Wa agenda zao wapange zile za kutuletea report. Wakishatuletea sisi wananchi report tutasoma. Na nimesema hilo jambo mara nyingi sana. Tukisha soma tutajadiliana. Tukisha jadiliana tutaelewa nini mbaya iko katika ile katiba na ni nini nzuri iko katika ile katiba. So tukija kutoa uamuzi, tutatoa uamuzi bila kuambiwa na mtu endeni mfanye hivi, endeni mfanye namna hivi. Tutatoa uamuzi wetu ambao sisi wenyewe tumekomaa. Kama vile tukilinganisha na ile katiba iliyopita, wengi walikuwa wakipiga kura wakisema Raila ametuambia, sijui Mheshimiwa Ruto ametuambia, sijui Mheshimiwa Kibaki ametuambia na kadhalika. Na hiyo ndio inafanya makosa mpaka tunakuja kupata katiba yetu ina makosa mengi kama vile tumeshuhudia kwa uchaguzi uliopita. Shukrani, ni John Adamba na nimezungumzia Bungoma.
Asante sana, John Nadamba. Of course, the face of Ebru, that is the side of Bungoma. But then, as though
He's
he
our
read
brand
my
ambassador.
mind, yes, of course, as though he read my mind in regards to the next question, and this is set to sort of lay bare what is going to be playing out in regards to politics right here in the country. Yes. And we are expecting to get increased political activity, of course, on this particular phase 2 of the particular report. And when you take a look at this and what he has said, do you suppose, Mike, then that the Tanga are trying to quell or are trying to contain Raila's activities, that of course within, I don't want to say the Jubilee Party, but of course within government, so to speak, because then the Jubilee Party is government itself. And I mean, because then we've seen shots clearly fired directly at Baba. And then how then does this come to a point whereby it's going to be useful and of importance to Wanjiku?
You know, Linda, politics is about visibility. Yeah. And the Tanga Brigade have realized that they are missing in action, which is not very good for their politics. So they must claim their space. Okay. Because had they continued the way they were continuing, that other group had already run away with all the publicity and all the visibility. And they were doing pretty well. I don't know, their next stop from Mombasa, where are they heading? Advice?
The BBI is now heading to Kitui.
Yeah,
to
Kitui,
yes.
And then they're going to go to, so they'll have Nyeri, they'll have Garissa.
So when you already have Nakuru, such a juggernaut already rolling out and you are missing in action, you are just sulking by the roadside.
And you're claiming to support the same.
Yeah, you easily become politically irrelevant. Okay. So that is one thing they've realized here. Actually, they've come to the realization that this thing now, they have to play a part. Whether they agree with it or whether they oppose it, they must find their own space and talk about.
Is it the irrelevance that Third Way Alliance has sort of felt? Hence now they're coming out to say that it's important now that we lost it on Punguza Mizigo, but we had issues that were important and would wish incorporated to solve the issues of Kenya. Then they say, of course, thanks to their Secretary General, that is Frederick Okango, who says now they're going to work together, not necessarily join, but they need to work together towards incorporating some of the proposals that were in Punguza Mizigo and having them, of course, on BBI, so that moving forward, if we are to head for a referendum, then at least some of these key things will be incorporated. One
thing that I've noticed, when I saw the Naivasha retreat resolutions, and then I actually watched Frederick Okango on TV last night, it occurred to me that we are living in very interesting times. It's good to have as many views and versions of this BBI on the table as much as possible. Because that is when we shall know what other Kenyans are thinking and how we can harmonize these thoughts and come up with a formidable report that can push this country forward. If people like Third Way Alliance or even the Tanga were to just keep quiet, then we would only have one version, the version that Raila is leading around the country, and that would not be very fair for a progressive society. So as for me, the Constitution allows every member of the society to speak openly and to associate openly. Let as many views and as many versions come to the table. Even yours, just draft yours and bring Natusome. We saw what came from Naivasha.
Right, we did.
Now, let's hear what the Third Way guys are saying. Then let's hear what the resolutions from the Raila circuit is saying. And then we sit down and say, what is missing here? What is included here? How do we integrate this and the other? And why do we think this one should not be included? And then the country will move forward.
Do we have enough space and time and, you know, sort of goodwill to have all these conversations and ensure that we come with a document that indeed we'll all agree to in unison as a people as we wind up on that?
You know, first of all, we have to look deeper into when politicians speak, sometimes they mean what they're not saying.
Okay.
You look at Third Way Alliance, and in my view, Third Way Alliance is just seeking political relevance because they had disappeared into oblivion. So they are trying to come up with a comeback strategy. So it's basically not about the issues in the BBI. To me, with Third Way Alliance, it's about their relevance back to the country. There was a time, I think, for a month or two, they dominated headlines all over, and I think it got into their heads. It got into their heads, and I read their document, and it was not a bad document, but the only problem that Third Way Alliance had is personalization of the document and they sought too much glory about them being the authors of the document than the ideals in the document. And that's where they lost it. That is the same way Tangatanga is now going. They're just going the third way. So in my view, and Linda, I don't think Tangatanga is supposed to have anything to add onto the BBI for the sole reason that it is only Tangatanga that agreed entirely with the BBI document that came out. They said they agree with it in totality. And they didn't want it changed. Now, when they now come up with the issues affecting Mwananchi and whatever, this is purely political relevance, and let us not attach it to anything that means that they want the good for the country. No, it's purely political relevance that every other person is looking for.
And like I said, I think it's important that, I mean, there's that party that needs to stay woke, and I think that should be on the common Mwananchi, because again, the mantle is on us to read this document, to go through it, to present our proposals like Mike has said, and most importantly, when it comes to the aspect of voting, if at all we're going to go for a referendum, then we should be wise in the decisions that we're going to make. We locked down on that particular topic. We're coming after this break to discuss much more in what has played out in the corridors of justice in regards to the release of Babu Owino, and also talking about the question of matters YT2 and the impeachment processes that I said. Are we okay for a break? All right, we're going for a break. And of course, we'll be having another guest joining us. All right, still on the state of affairs right here on Abra TV's New Day show. Thank you so much for keeping us company. And then we proceed with the discussion. But of course, this time around, another guest has joined us, Kidi Mwaga, who's a lawyer, seated in the middle. Okay, that is the middle. I'll say the middle, in between Mike and, of course, Advice. Thank you so much, Kidi, for finding time.
Thank you, Linda.
Was there traffic or what?
Well, bad things happen to good people.
All right, subject to discussion after the show. Welcome on board once again. We're discussing about the Tangatanga and sort of the meetings that were convened yesterday. Maybe if you'd have, you know, like a minute in regards to any reservations that you have over the same. Of course, the BBI aspect that is ongoing in the country and the Tangatanga way of handling issues. And equally, of course, what we've seen in regards to the rallies that have been conducted by Right Honorable Raila Odinga with the blessings of the President and also the BBI task force team at large.
Well, in a nutshell, I would say that Building Bridges initiative was founded on a presumption that time had come to audit our constitution. And constitution-making process is both a legal process and a political process. The meeting you saw in Naivasha, of course, contrasted with the meeting in Kisii, Kakamega, and Mombasa, are political processes in the constitution making this moment to audit our constitution. Sometimes political posturing and jostling can raise the decibels so much that the voice of reason may be drowned therein. The meeting in Naivasha, in a nutshell, I would say, was a meeting of people who think that if and when the constitution is audited and alterations made, then their piece of the pie may be either taken away or significantly reduced. My wish is that we are able to remain focused in this process and appreciate that where has our constitution served us? Where has it failed us? And then what are our unique circumstances that were not in the constitution that we needed to incorporate going forward? Because when all is said and done, we have an obligation of making our country great and make it stand tall in the league of successful nations. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Kidi, that's it. And of course, we'll not delve into that because also the question of time. And we come to this other side. I don't know why. Okay, well, great reservations there.
Proceed.
He is part of the youthful team, of course.
Yes.
Championing the
I am the executive director of Building Bridges Volunteers Trust.
Yes. All right, and of course, that's an interesting view coming from a volunteer. Equally, you know, sort of creating, or painting a picture of the common mwananchi in regards to what they would wish for the BBI. But that aside, let's come to the aspect where Embakasi East Member of Parliament Babu Owino was granted 10 million cash bail to be released after paying, of course, the first installment, that is 2.5 million. This is something that was probably long overdue. A majority of people expected that he's going to be granted bail in regards to the cases that were leveled against him. Of course, this shooting aspect that played out in B Club Nairobi, and equally has been told not to take alcohol, of course, orders from the court, at least at this particular time when they're dealing with this particular case. So first, let's listen in to what played out at the corridors of justice. Then let's come back to the discussion and or maybe to the gentlemen on board, and we get to hear what they have to say in regards to the same and more so the aspect of the system of justice right here in the country. Today in the morning, while sort of coming to the office, I passed through Thika Road. Somewhere in Pangani there was something that was written there. I don't know, there was like a poster, more of an advertisement, sort of speaking about inmates complaining about the fact that they remain poor and maybe the judiciary should come in handy to address their particular issues. I wasn't able to get the entire, sort of information that was there, but in the event that there's someone who has passed there and they've been able to capture that information, they can share what exactly it was all about. But then again, the question of inmates and how they've not been able to get bails granted to them. The other time, of course, the chief or maybe the head of judiciary, that is Chief Justice David Maraga, in a bid to try and sort of reduce the clogging at that particular levels of the cells, said that it's important that we grant these bails to some of the inmates that are in there. And, it seems like it has been a hullabaloo. Majority of them have not been able to get that granted to them. And we ask ourselves, are they less human beings, or what has informed this that has played out in Babu's case and a majority of other cases of prominent figures in the country? Let's listen into this.
Undoubtedly, two interpretations to such a gesture as taken by the prosecution on the one hand and the defense on the other hand. According to the prosecution, this shows impunity on the part of the accused person. It means I can shoot you and I can pay for your treatment. Therefore, it is not a gesture of kindness, but it is a show of strong and aggressive pride. However, in order that the accused person's gesture does not amount to hoodwinking the public and the court into granting him bond, I will grant bond conditioned on the following. Number one, the accused person shall meet the initial medical expenses of the victim, and to this end, this is going to be up to the value of Kenya shillings 10 million. This sum is equivalent to the value of the cash bail that this court sets for the accused person.
Gentlemen, and this poster was saying, a majority of inmates are poor. That is the only one that I was able to capture. And then we demand that the judiciary does, I don't know what. But then, of course, looking at this whole case that has taken center stage and a case of a majority of other prominent figures, like I started by saying, the likes of Obado that are out here in bail, the likes of Waitito, who are now facing the question of impeachment, the likes of Mike Sonko, and much, much more. What does it speak of course, the judicial system in the country?
Linda, I have 3 questions about what I've watched here. Mm-hmm. Since when did we start paying bail in installments? Mm-hmm. It's an interesting development in our judicial system. Because, is it because Babu is a prominent person? Mm-hmm. Is it because he's a rich man, so he gets preferential treatment? Do our people in the villages or even in the slums, do they enjoy such privileges as well of paying for bail in installments? If you are given even bail of 1,000 bob, can you pay 250 bob? And then you will pay
50 to 50
until one day when you are through. It's a very curious thing, and if it is a precedent, then I think we are heading towards very interesting times in the judicial system in this country. Secondly, what is the purpose of bail? Why are people bailed when a crime is committed and you are charged in court and a charge sheet is prepared, and then you take plea and then you are given bail? You are given bail to ensure that there is relative assurance that you will appear in court until your matter is heard and determined. Mm-hmm. That's why you pay bail. And when your matter is determined either way, you are supposed to get back that money. Now, the third question then comes, if part of this bail is supposed to go into medication of our friend DJ Evolve,
yeah.
What if all of it goes into the medication? So, and
there's no bail at all.
And the matter then comes to an end. What will Babu claim? And from who? so I think maybe my brother here.
Who's a lawyer? Who's a lawyer? And I would love to get his reservations last. Let me first of all come to advice in regards to the fact that, yes, Babu, you know, sort of a majority of people have claimed, not really claimed, it's something that we've witnessed and seen. He's a promising, you know, sort of leader, that's for sure. What does it speak of course, what you expect of the leadership and the kind of nurturing that goes on within the level of leadership within, of course, the legislature in regards to making the best of, you know, the youthful leaders that get into power?
I think, first of all, Linda, first of all, in my view, I appreciate the fact that Babu was granted bail because there needed to be no vacuum in Embakasi East, and those people really need to be served. And also the fact that in my opinion, Babu is one of the most promising and most hardworking members of parliament that we have, despite all these. But then the question of the judiciary, I have always had issues with the judiciary, like just the questions that my colleague has raised, because this is the same judiciary. I've actually never understood even why one court should make this judgment, then you appeal, this court finds you guilty, the other one finds you innocent, the other one finds you guilty, the other one finds you innocent. I don't understand that. This is the same judiciary where someone walks in, then they get something called anticipatory bail. Yeah? This is the same judiciary. But when they come out, they want to talk more about funds, they want to talk more about... You see, I've said it on this show, that one of the biggest problems I have with the legal minds in the country, with all due respect, is they have always crafted a way in which they are always the victim and they're never guilty of anything. Lawyers in this country have always looked like
like
the deputy assistants of the Holy Spirit, in the way they handle their matters. So there is a lot of hassle. Even the president himself asked what happens to the judiciary, because he said the same matter in the US is determined within a year. The same matter in Kenya will stay long overdue. And of course, the first answer that the legal minds will tell you is, we need evidence. And you know, they always have these choreographed answers for all the questions. And I'm sure that Kid is just going to give us the same choreographed answers for all these questions, the way lawyers always do.
And sadly, we cannot delve much into this because then it's a case that is still ongoing in court. So we do not want to inform the judgment and all that. But yes, on a legal perspective, do you agree to what they, or do you conform to the, or subscribe to the way they, you know, their ideology or the way they're thinking, or...
The rule of sub judice notwithstanding, let me say this. One, there is a world as it is, and then there's a world as it ought to be. So my friends must first appreciate that there is the Kenyan situation as it is, and then there is the Kenyan situation as it ought to be. When, for instance, the president is frustrated that judiciary is not doing certain things, and the same executive frustrates the work of the judiciary, I mean, it leaves a lot to be desired. On Babu Owino, we must appreciate that we are a common law jurisdiction, and therefore the doctrine of presumption of innocence takes precedent, especially in criminal matters. And when the judge, in his wisdom or lack of it, but I suspect it is the latter, not the former, decided that bail will be this much, and it will be paid in this much, we must also appreciate that there is what we call judicial discretion. So that a judge will determine a matter, will exercise discretion, while, of course, having applied himself the fact and the law, then he has an element of discretion that, of course, he enjoys. On whether Babu Owino is the most hardworking young legislator, that is debatable.
No, it's been proven.
It's promising.
No, it's been
promising is the one.
He has been awarded.
He
has been awarded.
I agree. Yes, but not the most hardworking. All right. Okay. Well, I think we leave it at that, because then
but it's proper for us to say Babu Owino has been awarded. It's not my opinion. He has been awarded as the most hardworking young parliamentarian.
Hence my question. He's very much promising, and you know, what does it speak?
So it's fact, not opinion.
Okay. All right.
For the record, we have not questioned the judge's discretion. That is his. When a judge sits in court, that's his territory.
Makes a determination, yeah.
And you can only appeal
Yes.
upwards. But whatever he decides there, that is his territory.
What I have a problem with.
Our only issue is going forward, what precedent
Are we setting?
are we setting?
Exactly.
Because it may be applied now in future.
I think
All
plus
right.
just to
Let me
add on,
say this
Linda.
on
Yes,
that. Let me
yes.
say this on that. One thing any first-year law student will tell you, that in common law jurisdiction, the laws are judge-made. So that the bulk of the law do not originate from the statute, but from the determinations from the bench. So therefore, if and when in future, that will form part of our precedents, that of course may be cited. But then you realize that this is a court of first instance.
Yes.
So that nothing stops the state, for instance, because it is a criminal matter, nothing stops the state from moving to a higher court and saying
Appealing.
that,
And appealing.
yes, that the judge at the trial stage,
All right.
misapplied himself to the law and maybe the fact, and therefore get a different determination.
We are
All
saying
right,
the
we
same
wait to
thing
see what
actually.
we get. Yes,
We are
more or
saying
less
the
the
same
same
thing
thing.
with-
I
with-
agree.
with Kidi.
I agree. Okay, can we cross over to the next?
I think I'm just concerned.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned because there looks like there's a rising case of these scenarios. We saw Aisha Juma shoot someone in is it Malindi?
Yeah.
And now we saw the lawyer that shot his son.
Yeah.
And now Babu Owino.
Allegedly. You know, they've not been convicted.
Okay, allegedly, allegedly. Before Kidi takes me to court, allegedly we saw the alleged shooting of. So we have seen Aisha Juma. We have seen the same case with the lawyer. I don't know what was his name. I've forgotten it. And then
Hassan Nyakundi.
Hassan Nyakundi. Then we've seen Babu Owino. Does it point to something? Is it a trend that is starting to come up with people who are legally given to hold firearms?
All right.
I think it is something that should be.
That needs
it's a
to be.
conversation that
should
needs
be
to be given.
All right. Of course, still the conversation is ongoing. I have to say, Kidi, allow me to go to the next sort of
By all means.
by all means. But then it revolves around the same thing, and I'm looking at the impeachment process of Kiambu Governor Ferdinand Waitito. Of course, a special meeting set for today and Wednesday in regards to addressing this particular thing at the level of the Senate. And, you know, speaking of the court, it just reminds me, or got me thinking, or maybe looking at some of the cases that have been presented in regards to the question of impeachment about 8th, or this should be the 8th one. And there's one also that, of course, saw a leader being saved by the courts. And this is it after, of course, the two famous Wambora of 2013 and 2014 were, you know, sort of presented to the level of the Senate. At some point in time, Wambora was saved by the courts. And, you know, sort of in a way, it was justified because then again, at that particular legal level, you're left with no choice. But then, of course, coming to the aspect of Waitito himself, we barely have time to delve deep into the details of it. But of course, today he faces Senate. And of course, as the House probes his impeachment motion, that is also on Wednesday. And we've seen a serious political clash cropping up in regards to this within the level of the Senate in terms of course, how they have set up the committee members. We have a list of the committee members that have been touched on. A majority of them sort of purported to be allied to the Deputy President William Ruto or are on the side of Tanga. And speaks volumes in regards to this particular issue and what will be the outcome. So, when you look at the list, I don't know, maybe I should just go through the list. Sylvia Kasanga, Auta, that is Frederick Outa, Okongo Mogeni. We have Aaron Cheriyat of Kericho. We have Oloiteptip of Lamu. We have Mithika Linturi, Meru. We have Iman Faida, who's nominated, Cleopas Malala, Kakamega, Susan Kihiga, Nakuru, and a couple of them, Sylvia Kasanga, Mohamed Faki. And sort of it felt like, you know, this was a list that was carefully engineered towards ensuring that, of course, there's a purpose outcome coming out of it in regards to the impeachment process. I mean, what is likely to play out in regards to this? Kidi.
Yes. Okay. Well, one, you realize that the special committee, as it were, was rejected.
Rejected, yes.
And the grounds for the rejection was that, as it were, it looked like the leadership selected people whom they could easily compromise.
Yeah.
And you know that where does the allegiance of the House majority, Senate majority,
yes.
where his loyalty lies. And the Senate has, in their wisdom, said, no, this matter can be dealt with in the plenary.
So whichever way, committee way would, or maybe a plenary way, of course, what would it mean? What would it speak for the people of Kiambu?
Okay, one, you see, you know, the Article 175 of the standing orders provides that when the matter goes to the Senate, I mean to the committee, then the committee, if the committee agrees with the findings of the county assembly, then the governor stands impeached. But then if the Senate does not find merit, then the impeachment process also dies, and the governor goes back to office. But then, as I mentioned earlier, is that this is both a legal process and a political process. There are political interests that, of course, are joined at the hip with this legal process. And those processes are, one thing is that, one, while we may all agree that Kiambu governor is incompetent, I said we may.
Yes.
But then the question is that in going forward, in political equation of the people of Kiambu, what is it that the realignment and the positioning, what is going on?
Yeah.
So that may have informed the decision by the senators to say that, no, let us come to the plenary so that while there is merit in this matter, that merit is therefore discussed at the plenary, because if it goes to the committee, then there are people who would easily get compromised and give a ruling that would serve political interests. Thank you.
All right.
Linda, the Waititu matter is interesting. And just like Idi has said, impeachment process, whether in Kenya or in America or anywhere else, is both a political as well as a legal matter. And politics is involved. No doubt about it. That's why you see the first committee had problems. The problems of the first committee was not that it was not legally constituted. It was not politically correct.
Okay. More or less the same thing that is playing out at the United States.
Yes. So impeachment is a political process and a legal one at the same time. But I want to talk about the law. Whichever way the committee rules, the committee can even find Waititu guilty and concur with the county assembly. You know, by law, then they will take their recommendation to the plenary.
To the plenary, yes.
The full house of the Senate. Senate may even agree that Waititu is guilty and therefore he should vacate office. But the impeachment process in Kenya is very long and tedious. From there, now Waititu goes to court. He has that right as
and the
a
court
citizen.
might save him like,
And Wambora went.
Wambora, yes.
And you know, when he goes to court now, he starts at the High Court. They'll listen to him. The High Court may even agree that he's incompetent. He will still have the right to appeal to the Court of Appeal. Even the Court of Appeal may agree that he's incompetent. He will still have the right to appeal onwards. So, in short, what I'm trying to say is, in all this process, Waititu still has a fighting chance. And it will take a long time before you remove him from office. But I want to talk about the politics now.
Yes.
Waititu is not your usual next-door governor. He's not Haemba or Wangamati. He's the governor of the president's home county. You cannot kick out such a fellow without the president's knowledge, or to say it bluntly, without the president's approval. Okay? So he must have stepped on some toes. That is why he's being harassed in that way. So he needs to also deal with the politics around his position. What is it that he did not do right in relation with his citizen number one, who is the president, which is affecting him badly? The other unique thing about Waititu's case is that for the first time, a governor who is facing a court case is also facing impeachment proceedings. You know, that's a very unique thing, because Ojamong is facing a court case and is not facing impeachment proceedings. Lenol Kulal is facing a court case but is not facing impeachment proceedings. Now, there were other cases like Wambora and Chepkwony. They were facing impeachment but not court proceedings. Now, for the first time, we are coming across a character who is facing both.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of energy he has to fight both battles on both fronts. That's my take on the matter of Waititu.
All right, do you suppose then there's going to be a political savior that is going to come in handy at this level of the Senate to save Waititu as it stands today, and equally speak about the aspect of the deputy governors that equally, we've seen, of course, his nemesis coming out, or maybe his sworn enemies as it stands right now in the name of, in the name of his deputy governor coming out to appeal or maybe to call upon the Senate to ensure that they heed to the call of the people of Kiambu in what he says, of course, thanks to the members of the county assembly. I mean, does it clearly speak of how much the deputies have also been witch hunting on their very own seniors?
I think to start off, they picked up on a very right trajectory when they tried to show Kenyans how the process of impeachment of a governor or any other elected leader in Kenya and African countries is. In my view, impeachments are meant not to happen in this part of the world. And one of my biggest problems I have with impeachment processes, especially in Kenya, is that they have more of the politics and very less of the real issues. In Kenya, impeachment motions come after you have a political problem and not necessarily an administration problem. I don't want to agree that in as much as I might have a personal reservation in the administrative style of Waititu, but I don't want to imagine that is the worst person and the worst administrator that is there in Kenya today.
Right.
And you would see that most of the problems he's facing is actually politically instigated. Yeah, it's because of a certain political alignment that he's in, which is very unfortunate, because for us to then have a properly guided nation, we must be able to stand for some principles and values, especially when it's about governance. Let's call incompetence for incompetence.
Right.
Let you not be incompetent on the day you stand with William Ruto. Let you not be incompetent on the day you are seen in Naivasha. Let people be judged on the true basis of actually, are you incompetent or not? And this begs the question why almost all governors are into the BBI, because it kind of looks like it is the quickest scapegoat to escape this corruption and whatever. I saw it on one of the dailies yesterday that one of the governors has been skipping Senate hearings on the basis that he has a problem with his health. But this problem of his health has not prevented him from attending all the 3 BBI rallies. So it is a principal matter, and it's a question of policy and structures. We really need to ensure that let a governor face disciplinary action because they are truly incompetent or truly corrupt. But once we always attach it with the politics, we lose the point. And that's why then deputy governors are taking warming up to this effect. Once you realize that your boss is non-aligned to the powers that be, you suddenly become aligned to the powers that be, then behold, you are a governor.
All right. Well, interesting view right there. Kidi, in regards to the numerous cases that have made their way to the level, the cases of impeachment that have made their way to the level of Senate, and really looking at a majority of them, they've really not been taken to that level where we've seen a certain person, of course, being impeached at that particular level. And, there have been rampant accusations on governors on the question of corruption, misappropriation of funds at the level of the county, lack of proper leadership at that particular level. And senators, for the longest of time, sort of in what one would want to use as a term, have shielded this whole affair or this governance at some point in time. Would it be attributed to the fact that yes, they've lacked watertight sort of cases that would incriminate these individuals, or would warrant the aspect of them being removed from office, or is it a question of they're looking at their political interests, their futures, and they equally are shielding themselves from such a scenario in the event that they traject to the level of governor?
Let me say this. First, political processes are characterized with what we call statecraft. In statecraft, one of the things you are doomed if you don't appreciate is that there will always be chicanery and subterfuge. People will conceal their true intentions and what they want to do next. In Senate proceedings and hearings, for instance, Martin Nyaga Wambora was successfully impeached. Then when he moved to court,
yes,
the court held that the process was flawed. There is a temptation to disagree with the court. But then, you know, the court, if a court interrogates, and in constitutional law, if the process is flawed, however right the outcome is, that in itself annuls the outcome.
Okay.
In this impeachment process, we plead with the Senate that they take all aspects into account so that the process is as unimpeachable as it realistically can be, so that if these matters then move to court, then the court sometimes may, in its own, acting on its own motion, may tell the applicant that this is an abuse of court process. So therefore, you have no, there is no business here to entertain, because if we interrogate the proceedings from the county assembly to the Senate to this place, I mean, they have complied with all the processes. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kidi. And of course, on the last meeting, or maybe the last reservation in regards to this, this is probably set to set precedents or stage for the likes of Governor Mike Sonko and a majority of other leaders. And of course, you've heard on the report and also on what has been presented from the level of course, the Office of Auditor General in regards to how much the governors have not conducted the activities at the level of the county pretty much well. So they're likely to take this direction also in the near future. So what does it speak of what is left of matters devolution in the country?
It means a very simple thing, Linda. It means that as a country, we devolved, but we did not put in place proper structures of governance at the county level. We devolved, but we forgot that we are sending a lot of money to the counties, we are sending a lot of money to the governors, and they are running governments, and the structures were not in place, and the systems were not in place. So much so that there is even duplication at the county level. Today, if you go to the county, you'll find two people doing the same job. We still have county engineers seconded from the national government, and we still have engineers who are employed by the county government as well. Some governors have even, when they assume office, they even sack everybody who was in the previous governor's system, and then they employ theirs.
Yes, yeah.
You know, we did not pay much attention to the systems in the counties and how they are supposed to work, and how they are supposed even to recruit, and how they are supposed to deal with even issues of governance, of administration. And that is why most of these counties, actually nearly all of them, when they are audited, you find serious problems in appropriation of funds, because even the appropriation policies were not in place by the time we were going out there. And you can tell when they step on the wrong nerves, and when the charges are brought before them, you can tell it's a terrible thing that's happening in our counties. So it is not even the governors we should be accusing. We should be accusing ourselves as a country, because we moved into devolution, but we did not pay much attention to how these units are supposed to run. Because going forward, we must now address this thing and see how do we make our counties benefit from the funds that are meant for them. Because the people in the counties require services. They require services dearly. They need, you know, health is devolved. And when health is devolved, it means the people in the village need to access medical attention right where they live. They need hospitals. They need doctors. They need medical equipment. They need drugs, all these things. But they will not get this unless we seal the loopholes of corruption. So much so that in my county, there are dispensaries and health centers that have been built, and they are not stocked, and they have no staff. So it is a hospital by name.
And just the structure.
And just a structure. And there's nothing else going in there. So we really need to seal these loopholes so that at least people get services in the county, because that was the real reason why we were devolving, to take services closer to the people. If we do not take services closer to the people, then we shall have failed as a country to make devolution profitable to our people.
Yes, like they've rightfully put it, devolution is a good thing, but then we need to rethink on the policies that we've set towards ensuring that this is a success. Unfortunately, gentlemen, time is not on our side, so we might not be able to get so much time to give your last sentiments. Let's reserve this for next week.
Okay.
Because then again, all the stories that we've touched on are developing stories for sure. The question of the BBI, the Tanga meetings that were set in Naivasha, of course, Babu Owino being released on bail, and lastly, on the question of Waititu Kidi, unfortunately, I have to call it again. So yes, of course, I will, of course, be following up closely on these particular stories, and my team will be here to update you on more that plays out in regards to the same. Thank you so much, Michael Leo, public policy analyst, and Kidi Mwaga, who's a lawyer in the middle, and lastly, Mudalu Advice, political and communication strategist. It was great having you, gentlemen. Thank you for the great insights, and equally the panel back at home. Thank you so much for your feedback. My name is Linda Alela. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing.